Well, Jumbo, everyone. Jumbo does mean hello. My name is Maddie, and I'll be your safari driver out here through the Harambe Wildlife Reserve. Now, if you take a look up above your heads, you will see an animal spotting guide up there. That's going to help you identify some of the animals that we might be seeing here on our journey. Now, no guarantees we're going to be able to see them all, but we usually get some pretty good luck. Now, if you are going to be taking any pictures, I highly recommend that you use some sort of a sports action motion setting. Basically anything with high shutter speed. We are going to be on the move, and of course so will the animals. Now, I also cannot stop for every animal that we find. So when I do stop, it's going to be for a very select few animals for about 5 seconds and sometimes even less. Really good idea. Take the time right now. Get your cameras out and get them ready to go. You really never know when or where we are going to be seeing some of these animals. But my friends, our first area here, it is through what's called the Little Aturi Forest. Now out here, definitely keep your eyes open and of course your cameras at the ready. The colors of these animals, they do tend to blend in very, very well with some of the dense vegetation found out here in the forest. Over there on your left hand side, up towards the top of the hill, there is a dark orange colored animal there called the bongo. And also on the right hand side, tan antelope, there is the greater kudu. Now the greater kudu, it is the second tallest antelope in Africa. We can actually tell that those ones there are females due to the fact that they do not have any horns. The bongo, they actually have the nickname of the ghost of the forest because a dark orange color and white stripe pattern on their body is a very good combination to help them blend into the background. Their horns do face backwards. That way when they run through some of the tall brush, those horns don't get tangled. But using the bongo's horns, easy to tell the difference between a male and a female. Female's horns make an X shape, so they crisscross towards the back, while the male's horns, they make a Y shape. Pretty rare that you'll ever see their such. Now, my friends, as we do pull forward here, of course, we're driving past that watering hole on your left-hand side. Animals do like to use watering holes as gathering places. One animal we can sometimes see gathered around the one to your left-hand side, of course, is that beautiful black rhino. Now, we pull forward. There's a second one here on the left, a little bit closer up to the truck there, just on the other side of the water up against the wall. Now, unfortunately, though, these black rhinos, they have been hunted nearly to extinction, and hundreds of thousands have actually been killed for their horns. Today, there is less than 3,500 black rhinos left in the entire world. But of course, our conservation efforts, they are doing their best to monitor those powerful animals and to give them any veterinary treatment and rehabilitation that they may need. Now, every single day, 2 to 3 black rhinos are being hunted and killed for those horns. So really think about that. Of course, that is a lot of them every single day. Now, those black rhinos, they do have a pretty unique upper lip because it's flexible. So they'll actually take their upper lip and then they stretch it out kind of like a finger or a tongue as a way to help them grab some of the food, and of course then they will scoop it right up into their mouths. They do have horns that are made out of keratin. Same thing our hair and our nails are made out of, with poor eyesight, making it pretty easy for a lot of those poachers to hunt them. But my friends, now that we've seen just a few of those forest animals, we are going to take the middle road here towards the Safi River, and of course it does connect to the Nile River. So if we're really lucky, we might spot some Nile species that have started to migrate over here. Sometimes we're even lucky enough to see a couple of Nile hippopotamus hanging out down here within some of the water. Now, when hippos are babies, they do weigh in at about 85 pounds, with a full-grown male weighing up to about 5,500 pounds. So they are very, very large animals. Now, as I do start to pull forward here, my friends, take a look over on your left-hand side behind the island. There's actually a whole group of those hippos hanging out on the backside there.
Oh, they're so cute.
Now, also on the island to your left, a couple of gray birds. Those are called pink-backed pelicans, and they get their name because during mating season, the colors of the males' backs do indeed change from gray to pink. But my friends, even though hippos are such large animals, well, they're actually excellent swimmers. However, they do prefer to kind of walk or glide on the bottom of the river instead of try and swim through any of the water. Now, they're also nocturnal animals, so they will spend up to about 16 hours of their day submerged in the water, and of course they do tend to sleep that way as well. But when they're asleep, their brains might automatically send their bodies up to the surface to get a breath of fresh air. That way they don't necessarily have to try and remember to wake themselves up to do so. Now, group name for hippos, that's actually a pretty fun one. It is in fact called a bloat. But my friends, as I do start to pull forward here and cross the bridge, for one, make sure that everyone does remain fully seated for me. But take a look over on your left-hand side. You'll actually see our second Nile species down there. Those are the Nile crocodiles. Now these crocodiles are cold-blooded animals, so they do like to kind of hang outside the water, and they will actually soak up some of that sun to warm their bodies up. Now once they get too warm, you might see them jump off into the water, or sometimes simply just open up their mouths. Well, that actually allows them to help push out some of that warm air and to regulate their body temperature since they don't have any sweat glands. They can also grow to be about 20 feet in length, about as long as a giraffe is tall. Now as we do pull forward here, it does look like we're getting closer towards another different ecosystem, and I can tell because these trees here are starting to thin out a little bit, so hopefully across the way we'll see a couple of different animals that we have yet to see out here on the reserve. But first, well, speaking of different, coming up on your right side here, you're going to see my all-time favorite tree, known as the baobab tree. Now it is also referred to as an upside down tree because its branches, while they do kind of look like roots, it can spend up to about 9 months out of the year, just like that one there, completely leafless, and they typically live to be about 2,000 years old. That one there on the right hand side is actually about halfway there already. But my friends, we are now entering off into that different ecosystem and my personal favorite view here on the reserve. Welcome to the savanna grasslands. Now these grasslands, they do stretch for hundreds and hundreds of miles, also referred to as a migrating highway, of course, because a lot of these animals do come here to migrate, but it is still home to some of the more famous and popular animals like the elephants and of course the beautiful giraffes. But my friends, this is the Africa we are working so incredibly hard to conserve. As I do pull forward here, take a look on your left-hand side. Newer animal on the reserve are called the African wild dogs. Black, tan, and white coloration to their body. You'll start to see some of them laying down there on your left as well. Now the African wild dogs are also known as painted dogs due to the very unique markings on their body. They are born all black. As they start to get bigger and mature, that black color will fade off into some of the tan and the white that you can see laying up against some of the bushes and the big rocks that are towards the back. Now unlike other dogs and wolves, they only have 4 toes, and of course they are absolutely adorable because they do have ears kind of like Mickey Mouse. Now when mothers have their litters, they can have up to 20 pups at a time, typically running in packs of about 5 to 15, depending on how much food supply they have. Tell you more about them here in just a bit. However, left-hand side as well, beautiful caramel-colored antelope there is the sable antelope. And you might actually recognize those animals. They are the emblem of our reserve. You can usually tell if it is a most dominant sable antelope. Typically they do have a darker coat on their body than the rest. However, that does not have to be a male. No, it can be a female, but it really just depends on who takes on that darker coat as they grow up. Now when they run in their herds, they do run with an alpha male and an alpha female, with the alpha female being the one that makes most of those decisions. Now with those African wild dogs, even though they are absolutely adorable, I do not recommend trying to play with them. No, they do actually have the highest kill rate of any mammal at about 80%. That is higher than a lion's kill rate. Now the mothers, they'll actually go out and they'll chase their prey. Once they catch that, they will eat it, take it on home, and of course then they will regurgitate it for their children to eat. Looking across the way there, up at the top of the hill, you're going to see a very large herd of gray animals. Those are the white bearded wildebeest. There's also a larger tan antelope walking around there as well, and that is the Patterson's eland. Now the Patterson's eland, it is one of the largest antelopes in Africa. On a full-grown male, from their shoulders down to the ground, can actually be about 6 feet tall. Now from a standstill position, they can jump up to about 8 feet straight up in the air, so about even with your head while you're sitting here on the truck. The white bearded wildebeest, they get their name from the Afrikaans word that does mean wild beast. Of course, getting that name because they do give off a pretty scary appearance to a lot of animals. However, to us, they are also known as gnu, spelled G-N-U, because they make a pretty low grunting noise, kind of sounds like noo-noo. Now when those animals sleep at night, they will sleep in a perfect row, leaving just enough space in between each row in case of an emergency. That way they're able to get up and run without trampling all over each other. Now that herd up there will look like a fairly large herd of white-bearded wildebeest. However, it's actually very small. They do run in herds up to about 1 million of them at a time. Now as they do pull forward here as well, take a look over in this tree to the right-hand side. Of course, you will start to see a couple of giraffes there as well. Now giraffes are actually the world's tallest land animal, but believe it or not, they do only have 7 vertebrae in their necks. That of course being the exact same amount we have in our necks. Theirs are just much, much larger than ours. Now you might notice that the pattern on these giraffes' bodies, it is fairly irregular. Pretty easy way to tell that they are Maasai giraffes. Also, kind of looks like they've got horns on their heads, but those are not horns. They're actually called ossicones. Now, when a baby giraffe is born, they can look a full-grown man directly in the eye, standing at about 6 feet tall. They also have about a 6-foot drop to the ground as they are being born, so it's a very cozy way into the world. But of course, when those giraffes eat, they do like to stand kind of at the base of the tree, and they will eat the underneath leaves. Typically, though, you won't actually see them biting down on the branches. No, what they much prefer to do is they'll take their tongue, they'll wrap their tongue around the branch, and then they strip it of its leaves. Now, their tongues can be about 16 inches long. They also have a black-purple color to them, and that's to help prevent those tongues from getting sunburned while they eat. Now, as you can imagine as well, it does take a lot to get that blood to pump throughout their body. So they do have some pretty big hearts that can be about 2 feet long. However, since that blood does have to travel quite some way, they also tend to have really, really high blood pressure with that as well. But my friends, as I pull forward here, take a look around the truck. You might notice that a lot of these trees here have been knocked down. Well, of course, that is a very, very good indicator that the African elephants have definitely walked through here before. Now, the good news is we're actually not quite over into Tembo country just yet. Tembo is actually the Swahili term for elephant. So hopefully across the way here, we will be lucky enough to see a couple of very beautiful African elephants. Now, we do also, friends, just go for African elephants as well. One of the easiest ways to tell if it is a bull, also known as a male, obviously is going to be based on their size. They do tend to be just a little bit larger than the females. But also, when a male African elephant reaches maturity, they will actually separate themselves completely from the rest of the herd. Now, of course, my friends, if you do take a look there on your right-hand side, a little bit over your right shoulder, you'll actually see one of those bull African elephants right there on the right. Now, these elephants, they do have some pretty unique teeth. Now, when their teeth grow in, they kind of look like our molars, but they do have a little V indent inside of them. Of course, that's there to help them bite down on bamboo, possibly even some tree branches. But once those teeth get used enough, they'll actually shave down to the point where they crack and then break off, leaving room for the next set of teeth to grow in. Now, kind of like how we go through 2 sets of teeth throughout our lives, elephants will actually go through about 6 sets of teeth throughout their entire lives. So for them, much more of an ever-ending cycle. But my friends, in just a second here, we are going to be entering off into Tembo country. Now, have your cameras out and ready. There are a couple of locations over here where, unfortunately, I cannot stop for a photo of any of the elephants that we might find. But the good news is, as I do exit off of this bridge here, looks like a whole herd has at least walked through here before. And I can definitely tell there's a lot of elephant footprints here on the ground. But as I do start to pull forward, of course, we're going to be driving through these red clay pits. So, take a pretty close look at this wall coming up here on your right-hand side. You will notice that there are a whole bunch of elephant tusk marks here within a lot of this red clay. Now, elephants, they love going up to those red clay pits, and they will actually dig their tusk into them. Once they get some of that clay loose, well, they will eat it, just in case they're missing any nutrients from their diet. So that's kind of their way to help take their vitamins in the morning. Now, as a way to help out the African elephants as much as possible, there are a lot of scientists and researchers studying their vocal patterns to try and find out what they need. Now, one of the biggest things that they've learned is that these elephants here really, really don't like to be around honeybees. So a lot of the farmers here in Africa, they've actually been setting up honeybee fences as a way to keep the elephants out of their crops. And of course, in return, they have gained a new crop of honey. Now, my friends, as I do pull forward, you will start to see that female herd of African elephants hanging out there on your left-hand side. Now, take a look at the shape of the elephant's ears. You might notice it does make the shape of Africa. Well, of course, it's a very easy way to tell that they are indeed African elephants. Now, they also like to take those ears and they'll actually flap them back and forth, just because on the inside of an elephant's ear they do have some blood vessels, and when some of that cooler air starts to hit those blood vessels, it will drop their body temperatures up to about 15 degrees, so it does make quite a big difference for them. They also tend to have really, really dirty backs and bellies because they have some sensitive skin, and it'll burn, especially here in the hot African sun. So they do like to take dirt, sand, clay, mud, grass, water, basically anything like that. They'll throw it onto their backs and their bellies to give themselves some sort of a natural sunscreen, and of course help to keep that skin cool and protected throughout the entirety of their day. Looks like one of those elephants is going to be right over here by the baobab tree, and also see a younger African elephant over there as well. Now, when one of those babies is born, they do weigh in roughly at about 300 pounds. And of course, that can only happen after the mother has gone through roughly about a 22-month-long pregnancy. But my friends, we are not going to be swinging past what's called Flamingo Island. And of course, that is home to the greater flamingos. Now, that term greater in their name, it does refer to their size. These are actually one of the largest flamingo species. Now, believe it or not, when these birds are hatched, they're actually hatched gray. Now they're also the palest of the flamingo species, so they won't actually start to take on that pinkish tint till about roughly a year or two after they're born from their diet of shrimp, which contains beta-carotene, and that's actually what gives them that pinkish tint. And of course, my friends, the group name for flamingos, well, that is in fact called a flamboyant. Just see that baby African elephant there one more time on your left. Like I said, they do have their beautiful tusks made out of ivory, with that ivory being very expensive on the black market. Unfortunately, that's why they are hunted and poached for their tusks.